Terrible news for Kamala Harris, as if her campaign is not sinking fast enough. The far-left LA Times, the largest newspaper in California, will not be endorsing her despite backing Obama, Clinton, and Biden. The paper didn't give a specific reason as to why they're not endorsing her, but I have a slight suspicion, and it might have something to do with this right here. Nobody wants to hitch their wagon to a sinking ship. The Harris campaign has been falling off a cliff the last couple of weeks. No one wants to give an endorsement knowing that that candidate is simply going to lose. The paper even went as far as to call it the most consequential election in a generation, but even still, they will not endorse her. Maybe she's just a terrible candidate.
Now, I have to agree that within these past few weeks, the Harris-Walz campaign hasn't failed to get bad news each day. If you guys remember, the reception to her taking over was overwhelmingly positive. From CNN to MSNBC, everybody was glad to be rid of President Joe Biden. Harris was seen as the light of hope for the Democratic Party because, especially given their initial nominee's mental decline. But the minute that Tim Walz and Kamala Harris took on interviews, things quickly turned sour. That's because you can pretty much only fake it for so long. They faked it, but never made it. And the Los Angeles Times knows that the end is near for Kamala Harris's campaign. This is only made worse with their endorsement history. The newspaper has endorsed every Democratic presidential candidate since 2008. Starting with former President Barack Obama. Now, what's really weird here is that they endorsed Kamala in her previous races. They endorsed her with the U.S. Senate, State Attorney General, and of course they supported her when Joe Biden was running for president. So why are they suddenly changing their minds this close to the 2024 presidential election is the question. Patrick Soon-Shiong, the billionaire doctor who bought the newspaper back in 2018, didn't give much of an explanation as to why they're not endorsing Kamala Harris. He also didn't allow his staff to endorse Donald Trump. But the optics look really bad for the VP given that she lives in the Brentwood neighborhood of LA. She served as their attorney general and senator not too long ago, which means that she has a good history with them. Trump's team called it a humiliating blow to her campaign, adding that even her fellow Californians know that she's not up for the job. Unions have also steered away from Kamala Harris, with most of them choosing to endorse Donald Trump. Although she did get an endorsement that Donald Trump says is right up her alley. She got this just a few weeks ago. Watch.
It's no wonder that Kamala Harris was just officially endorsed by IRS agents. Do you believe it? That's when you'd say, I'd rather not have that endorsement. But I've been endorsed by virtually every police group in the entire nation. Every police group. Almost every sheriff's group, every police group, every one of them. We just had one, the Fraternal Order. We just had 400,000 policemen. That's the biggest of all the unions and the endorsement. And this is the first time in decades, just got endorsed by the rank and file members of the Teamsters, which I happen to think is amazing. That was a surprise. That's automatic for the Democrats, and they now the bosses didn't endorse me, but they had a problem because they got 30% of the vote. We got actually 60 or 61% of the vote. Can you believe it? So the people that were in the 61, the people that want us, they said, well, how come you didn't endorse them? Why do you? They're just going to take a pass. But maybe that's okay. That's all right. We know where they stand, and that's good. Kamala Harris is the candidate of the tax collectors and the Washington bureaucrats. I am the candidate of the American worker, and I always will be. I always will be.
The distinction between the two could not have been any clearer. I also have to note that the Border Patrol Union is also backing up the former president. It's not a good look for the border czar, which now brings me to this hilarious idea that her campaign is now spreading out through mainstream media. They're now saying that men who don't vote for her can be considered as misogynist. She says it herself and pins the blame on black men. Watch.
Do you think some of the resistance of some men, black and white, is misogynist? And are you proud to see that most Americans, even being polled, have no problem supporting a woman at all? And I'm one that lived from Shirley to Kamala in terms of these campaigns.
And I have an emotional reaction to you raising the point of Shirley Chisholm, because it is on her broad shoulders that I stand, and so many of us stand. And we have come a long way, to your point, and on your specific point about including the fact that I have the support of countless black men who are in elected positions, including just this afternoon and 2 church visits today with the mayor of Atlanta. That being said, I think that you are absolutely right, that there is this narrative about what kind of support we are receiving from black men that is just not panning out.
Welcome to Identity Politics, folks, where it doesn't matter if you can do the job or not. All that matters is the color of your skin or your gender. Straight up DEI stuff. Although many would argue that they're not voting for Trump simply because he's a man. All they're doing is voting for the same guy who's proven himself before in the White House. Unlike the vice president who's repeatedly shifted the blame of the issues that we're facing today to Donald Trump. Now, speaking of the blame game, you heard how Kamala Harris changed the question from black and white men to just black men, further pushing on the message that was started by former President Barack Obama, and others who feel the same way are now coming forward. Watch.
You said something is wrong with brothers who don't know how to support a sister.
Yeah. Full stop.
And Mordecai was man enough to know that in order for me to be a man, I got to know how to support a woman. Something is wrong with brothers who don't know how to support a sister. It was a sister that raised you. It was a sister that taught you how to read. It was a sister that taught you how to bathe yourself.
In the context of the vice president, were you trying to send a message?
That we've got to be able to vote, that misogyny is still real in our community. We've got to address it head on and not act like it doesn't exist. The reality is, if black men had voted, Stacey Abrams would be a governor. And so I think that we've got to do some real redress, that after racism, the biggest ill in America is sexism. And I think it's part of the responsibility of this generation to deal with it head on.
So what happened to free will? What happened to making your own choices in life? Because they can't accept the fact that more and more black men are steering away from the Democratic Party. That's why. And the best part is that they only have themselves to blame for that, even though they're going to try their best to have a scapegoat if Kamala Harris does lose this election. More about this Harris CNN town hall and how the vice president bombed the whole thing. All right. So let's talk about some of my takeaways from the first night. All right. So first, there's the fact that the Democratic presidential nominee just basically made it a matter of hammering her typical talking points during interviews and stump speeches when it came to the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza, immigration, the economy, and how she would lead differently than President Joe Biden and other issues. Really? No surprise here. Kamala Harris just pretty much kept her answers safe and avoided making news when asked by voters on hot button topics. This right here, during a time when a presidential nominee should be fighting for the spotlight in all those headlines. She's trying to play it safe. Anderson Cooper asked if she felt that the Biden administration should have issued an executive order sooner in order to limit the asylum at the U.S. southern border in order to curb the influx of migrants. Well, for the vice president, they did the right thing. And she added that the best thing would be bipartisan work on immigration reform from Congress. Then, of course, surprise, surprise, she fell back to blaming Donald Trump and saying that he ended a negotiation among bipartisan senators earlier this year when pressed on immigration. She was also asked by a voter about what she would do to ensure that not another Palestinian dies due to bombs being funded by U.S. tax dollars. Good question, right? Well, it was a swing and a miss for the vice president. She just pretty much repeated her same typical talking points again by calling for the war to end, for security for Palestinians and Israelis. I mean, they may as well just kind of played clips from her old interviews and speeches, because it was a whole lot of nothing new. The usual line of far too many innocent Palestinian civilians have been killed, ending the war, and bringing the hostages held by Hamas home. I mean, those are pretty good talking points, and those things should be done. But again, did she really even answer the question? And then, of course, there's Kamala Harris's obsession with former President Donald Trump. Even in her own town hall, she inevitably talked mostly about Trump and how he's a fascist and a threat to democracy. Really, nothing new that we haven't heard before from her. When Anderson Cooper asked her, "Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?" she responded, "Yes, she does." A lot of what she said ultimately led to Trump being a fascist. When asked later about her pro-Israel stance and what she would say to voters who were thinking about supporting a third-party candidate because of the Biden administration's handling of the war in Gaza, she said that for many people who care about this issue, they also care about bringing down the price of groceries, who also care about our democracy and not having a president of the United States who admires dictators and is a fascist. Wow. So again, another non-answer to the actual question and just her repeating that Donald Trump is a fascist. Cooper also asked Harris if she believes Donald Trump is anti-Semitic. And so that's when she called him dangerous and a danger to the well-being and security of America. Oh, and then of course there was the part about Kamala Harris trying to talk about her many mistakes. She said that she's probably worked very hard at making sure that she's well-versed on issues, and it's a mistake not to be well-versed on an issue and be compelled to answer a question. You see, Kamala Harris was originally asked by a voter about which weaknesses she brings to the table and how she plans to overcome them while in office. Harris said that she's certainly not perfect, but then she went on to identify what she thought was a strength. She talked about not being quick to have the answer as soon as you ask it about a specific policy issue sometimes, because she's always going to want to research it and study it even. She described it as her being kind of a nerd sometimes. And that, for Kamala, was her answer to what her weakness was. Not her policy flip-flops, not her lack of answers on the economy and the border security, not even the millions of illegal immigrants that she helped let into the country. That is Kamala for you guys. Now, former President Donald Trump, he didn't dignify CNN with a town hall appearance, but he may as well have been there for all the times that Kamala Harris talked about her. Somebody actually took account and found that Vice President Kamala Harris mentioned Trump by name more than 24 times during her CNN town hall, including when pressed about specific policies that she would institute if elected to the White House. Fox News found that Donald Trump's name came up 26 times from Harris. Meanwhile, Trump was mentioned overall by moderator Anderson Cooper or audience members a total of 43 times. All of this in a span of an hour and 15 minutes from 9 p.m. to 10:15 in the evening. Now, one shining moment for Trump, yes, a shining moment for Trump in the Kamala Harris town hall was when Anderson Cooper pressed Kamala Harris on her support of a bipartisan bill that would provide funding for a border wall that she previously criticized as a stupid idea from Trump. The CNN host brought up the fact that even though Kamala Harris called it stupid, the compromise bill she wants to pass includes $650 million in funding for the border wall. So the question was, is a border wall stupid? Now again, Kamala Harris didn't answer the question and instead talked about Trump. Talked about how Trump said Mexico would pay for it and how they blocked the building of the wall until they were only able to finish about 2% of it. Anderson Cooper asked her again, so you don't think it's stupid anymore? Here's Harris's response word for word. I think what he did and how he did it did not make as much sense because he actually didn't do much of anything. I just talked about that wall, right? We just talked about it. He didn't actually do much of anything. Yeah. Now, seriously, guys, I've heard from people comment how voting for Kamala Harris is kind of like voting for your own execution. Actor and director Mel Gibson said that she's got an IQ of a fence post.
A lot of people I know what it'll be like if we let her in.
Yeah.
Oh, really? And that ain't good.
Yeah. Well,
miserable track record. Appalling track record. No policies to speak of.
Yeah. And the border, right?
And she's got the IQ of a fence post.
Now, let me repeat that for you guys. Miserable track record, appalling track record. No policies to speak of. And she's got the IQ of a fence post. I guess Democrats just didn't get the memo. Their hand-picked candidate was a poor choice, and this is coming from the American voting people. As CNN anchor Dana Bash said in their panel after the town hall, if their goal was to close the deal, they're not sure she did that. But again, the killer line here was from David Axelrod, Obama's key bro in his presidential campaigns. He said that when she doesn't want to answer a question, her habit is to kind of go word salad city. He even pointed out that Kamala Harris did that on a couple of answers. One on Israel. Anderson Cooper asked a very direct question. Would you be stronger on Israel than Trump? And then there was like a 7-minute answer, but none of that related to the question he was asking. He also said that she would acknowledge no concerns about any of the administration's policies. And for the longtime political strategist, that is a huge mistake. Axelrod said that sometimes you just have to concede things, and she did not concede much. CNN host Abby Phillip also chimed in to say that Kamala just doesn't want to go there, and the stress is really starting to show now. National Democrats have told the press that they're concerned about Kamala Harris's standing less than 2 weeks ahead of the election day on November 5th, as former President Donald Trump leads in polling averages of all 7 major battleground states. I mean, if you ask a lot of Americans, and I do mean a lot, the race shouldn't even be this close in the first place. First, they're trying to wheelchair Joe Biden across the finish line. Then they shoehorned Kamala Harris in his place. Nobody wanted her, nobody voted for her. And so now they're trying to make it look like Donald Trump is a fascist and that Kamala Harris is the only choice in this election. Well, Americans have had it with the political elite trying to tell them what to do and who to vote for. And you can bet that they're going to try to make their voices heard this November, right guys? And to be honest guys, mainstream liberal media has been doing its best to help the vice president in this race, even going so far as to lie to the American people by manipulating footage from an interview. Now, I covered this in a previous video where Donald Trump is now calling for CBS to be taking off the air by the FCC. Make sure you guys watch that after this. As always, appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much for keeping yourselves informed. Thank you for hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and sharing this video. We'll see you guys next time. Oh, and make sure to check out this next video that's coming right up.